Keeper of the Lost Cities Neverseen, Chapter 13. How many times did you have to say the oath before your cube opened? Bianna asked, fiddling with her black swan pendant, as she followed Sophie and Della down to breakfast. I think it was my fourth, Della said, lifting the hem of her long black and white gown to descend the stairs. Surprisingly, Bianna had worn pants, though the tunic she paired them with was embroidered with butterflies, and she had jeweled butterflies pinned in her hair. Somehow, Bianna made it all seem effortless. Even her matching lip gloss. I got mine in the third try, she told Sophie. What about you? Sophie looked away. My first. I guess I should have figured that, Bianna said through a sigh. She held her pendant up like a monocle. Do you have any idea what these do? All my note said was, to show you the world in new ways. Mine said, for when you need a closer look, Della added. They glanced at Sophie. Mine said they were glad I made the right choice. Huh, Bianna said. It must be weird to be you. Talk about an understatement. All the things Calla had told Sophie were still buzzing around in her mind, especially the part about Calla being involved with Project Moonlark. For some reason, she'd imagined the project only including Mr. Forkle, sitting alone in a lab with a microscope and some petri dishes. But now she could picture a whole team, multiple people and species brainstorming and planning, resting their hopes on her to be their Moonlark. And what if... All thoughts dropped away when they reached the gazebo. Your hair! Della gasped, rushing to where Fitz sat at the table. His usual dark waves had been dyed green, and they stuck out in every direction. Someone slipped an elixir into my shampoo this morning, Fitz said, patting the spikes and eyeing Dex. But it's cool. I kind of like it. Dex snorted. Keep telling yourself that. Actually, it's not that bad, Bianna said. Yeah, Fitz can pull off anything. Sophie blushed as she considered the implication of her words. Keith groaned. I knew we should have gone with the balding elixir. Next time. Della told him. You need to fix this. Now. Do you really want the Black Swan seeing what you've done? Keith shrugged and grabbed a pastry from one of the platters in the center of the table. They're walking around crusted with ice and turning their bodies into stone. Cactus head is nothing. Okay, let's try this a different way, Della decided. If you get to make over my son, then I get to make over both of you. Works for me, Keith said. I look awesome in everything. Tell that to your feet when they spend the rest of the week bouncing in my tallest heels, Della told him. Okay, forget that. Dex reached into his pocket and pulled out a tiny brown vial. This will get rid of the green. Thank you, Della rumpled Dex's hair as he gave the vial to Fitz. Fitz downed it in one gulp, gagging at the taste. No more pranks, Della said, wagging a finger at the three boys. Or... what if Fitz looks normal, but doesn't smell very good? Keith asked. Bianna giggled. Della sighed. What am I going to do with you, Keith? I hear the Lord of the Universe title is up for grabs. Unless Foster's trying to snatch it. All yours. Sophie had enough responsibility already. So, you guys didn't have any problems with the oath? Bianna asked. Nope. Got mine third try, Dex said proudly. Me too, Bianna said. Ha! Beat you both, Fitz told them. Only took me 2. Don't get so smug. I'm sure Foster nailed it first try, Keith laughed when she blushed. I knew it. How many tries did it take you? Bianna asked him. Keith looked away. So, what did everyone's note say? Sophie asked, saving him from having to answer. Mine said, because seeing is believing, Dex said. I didn't realize they were different. Fitz smoothed his back-to-normal hair. Mine said, the smallest things can be the most dangerous. Everyone looked at Keith. Don't lose your way. Bianna repeated the other notes and studied her pendant. I still don't get what they do. Typical Black Swan, Fitz said. Seriously, Dex agreed. Don't they realize riddles are a huge waste of time? Are they? Granite asked, crossing the bridge to reach the gazebo. His face looked like clay soil that had cracks in the sun. And here I thought we were training our minds to think critically and solve problems. There are no easy answers in this world, Wraith added, his silver cloak appearing beside Granite. Biana moved closer to study him. How do you particularly vanish like that? Work hard enough and I'll teach you, he said, but today we'll be perfecting the basics. Rescuing Prentice will require a lot of precision you currently do not have. So, prepare yourself for a long, exhausting day. Meanwhile, I'll be initiating your Cognate training, Granite told Sophie and Fitz. Today will be the test to see if your cognatum is truly a possibility. Sophie's stomach dropped to her toes. She was very glad she hadn't eaten any of the pastries yet. What about us? Keith asked, pointing to himself and Dex. You both have study materials in your room, Granite said. You're seriously telling us to go read? Keith asked. Sophie leaned closer to whisper, It's only one day. A lot can happen in a day, Foster. You know that better than anyone. It's cool, Dex jumped in. I have a project we can both work on. The way he said project made Sophie wonder what prank he was planning. She hoped it'd be worth it, since she was sure Della would make good on her threat of high heels. But she was glad to see Dex once again keeping Keith from getting too frustrated. Part of her wished she could go with them as they crossed the bridge and headed up the stairs. Instead, she followed Fitz and Granite down to the river, trying to convince herself Cognate training wouldn't be as scary as it sounded. Mr. Forkel and I spent last night preparing these, Granite said, handing Sophie and Fitz each a black notebook labeled Cognate Lessons. But as we developed these exercises, we realized we were skipping a crucial step. The three of them sat in the shade of a tree with purple leaves, watching the glassy river rush past. Across the water, Della and Biana were practicing with Wraith, pacing back and forth while vanishing. Biana could only walk half the distance of the others before she'd reappear. The cognate relationship requires both trust and balance, Granite said, reminding Sophie she should be paying attention. And it's impossible to work on the former without the latter. In your case, Fitz, while you're an incredibly talented telepath, your skills simply do not match Sophie's. Sophie cringed, wondering if the criticism would bother Fitz. But he grinned at her and said, Yeah, she makes us all look bad. She does indeed, Granite agreed, his face cracking further as he smiled. So, if you're going to be her cognate, you need to get up to her speed. But aren't her abilities strong because of all the tweaks you did to her genes? Fitz asked. Actually, much of Sophie's strength comes from practice. Her ability was triggered 8 years ago, and Mr. Forkel trained her mind every night until last year. He did? Sophie asked, shuddering at the mental image. I thought I had to be conscious to learn telepathic skills. Wasn't that why he couldn't teach me to shield? Certain skills, yes, Granite agreed, but others can be absorbed. I'll show you how. He instructed them to scoot closer, until their knees were touching. It'll be easier if you hold hands. Sophie tried to return Fitz's smile, but her palms were sweaty, which was stupid. She'd held Fitz's hand every time they light leaped or teleported. It was no big deal. What now? Fitz asked, twining their fingers together. Sophie hoped he couldn't feel her racing pulse. Now, I want you to observe Sophie's mind in action. And Sophie, I think it's best if you focus on the skill that seems to come to you most effortlessly. Transmitting long distances. Oh, I've always wondered how she does that, Fitz said. Who should I transmit to? Fitz asked. In my telepathy sessions, I always practiced on Fitz. Or I call for Sylvanie, but I'm guessing that won't work since she's not an elf. Actually, that could be interesting, Granite said. It might open Fitz's mind to 2 skills, distance transmission and telepathy with animals. I'm not sure the latter skill can be taught, but it's worth the attempt. Does Sylvanie think in the enlightened languages? Fitz asked. Only the few words I've taught her, Sophie said. Otherwise, it's her language or images and memories. That may make it confusing, Granite warned, but still a good test. In fact, This should be a definitive indicator of your cognate success. If Fitz's mind can't learn from yours, it'll prove you're not compatible. The last word dumped about 1,000,000 pounds of pressure on everything. I won't care if this doesn't work, okay? Fitz transmitted after she gave him permission to slip past her blocking. She could see the hope in his eyes, feel the excitement in his grip, and she definitely didn't want him thinking they weren't compatible. Okay, she said, stalling 1 second longer. She closed her eyes and pictured the sanctuary, with its rainbow sky and rolling pastures. The dwarves had built the lush animal preserve inside the Himalayan mountains to keep it secret from humans. The rock walls also prevented the alicorns from teleporting away. Sophie wished Sylvanie could have kept her freedom, but the precious alicorn needed protection. The Neverseen had tried to capture Sylvanie twice. One time, they'd even broken her wing. "Sylvanie," she transmitted, making Fitz jump. "Sorry," she mumbled. "I should have warned you. It will be loud." "But it's awesome," Fitz promised. "I need to learn how to project with that kind of power." "Hopefully this process will teach you," Granite reminded him. "Sylvanie," Sophie said again, and this time Fitz barely flinched. He even held steady as she repeated the call a few times. But he did jump when an exuberant shout filled her mind. "Friend! Sophie! Visit! Fly!" "That is so crazy," Fitz said. "Does that mean you can hear Sylvanie?" Granite asked. Fitz laughed. "I'm surprised the whole universe can't. Every word she sends needs to end with an exclamation point." "Tell me about it," Sophie said. "Can you understand what she's saying?" Granite asked Fitz. "So far, but I think she's speaking the enlightened language." "She is." Sophie's mind filled with the new round of visit, 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 plus several keefs. "Wow, she really loves keef, doesn't she?" Fitz transmitted. "It's adorable and obnoxious, isn't it?" Sophie asked. There were so many keef chants going. Sophie almost didn't notice when Sophie added a Greyfell to the mix. "Is everything okay?" she asked. Greyfell was the male alicorn who lived at the sanctuary. He'd grown violent not long after Sylvanie arrived, but only because he was afraid of the ogre homing device hidden in Sylvanie's tail. Once the arrow mark had been removed, he'd calmed down. Still, Sophie remembered the ferocity in Greyfell's eyes and the darkness she'd seen in his memories. He'd lived a much harsher life than Sylvanie, and it had made him cold and wary. And yet, the memories Sylvanie sent showed the two alicorns playfully dipping and diving through the hologram sky and chasing each other through the colorful meadows. If they hadn't been sparkly flying horses, Sophie would have teased them for flirting. Plus, she honestly hoped that was what they were up to. Sylvanie and Greyfell were the last of their kind, and everyone was counting on them to be repopulating the species. That was why the alicorns needed so much protection. The elves believed that letting any creature go extinct would cause the planet irreversible damage, so whoever controlled the alicorns controlled the council. "I'm glad you have a friend," Sophie said, wishing she could reach across the world and stroke Sylvanie's shimmering nose. "You'll have to tell him hi for me." "Miss," Sylvanie told her, making Sophie's eyes burn. "I miss you too. But you're safe?" "Safe, safe, safe," Sylvanie promised, which of course led her back to more pleas for Sophie to visit, and a host of additional keefs. Somewhere around the 10th chant, a new voice chimed in. One with a crisp accent. "Hi." It was a small word, but its effect was huge. Sylvanie pummeled Sophie with worries as Fitz shouted, "I did it!" Sophie could hear Granite and Fitz celebrating, but first she had to calm Sylvanie down. "That's Fitz," she told the suspicious alicorn. "Friend?" Sylvanie asked. "Yes, a very good friend." She sent memories of the few times Fitz had been around Sylvanie to remind her of who he was. When that didn't seem to be enough, she replayed the moment Fitz had saved her life, finding her when she was fading away after the kidnapping. "Like," Sylvanie decided. "I like him too. As a friend," she added quickly, in case Fitz was listening, but he and Granite were too involved in their deep discussion on Fitz's progress. It was only the first step, Granite told them, but it's very encouraging. You two truly have the most unique connection I've ever encountered in all my years of telepathy. Sophie's cheeks burned, and she was glad Fitz was too busy trying to transmit again. It took his mind 2 tries, but he managed another "Hi." "Fitz," Sylvanie replied. "Sophie, Fitz, friend." "Friend," Fitz replied, his voice louder, more confident. They spent the rest of the day in a bizarre, one-word-at-a-time conversation. Fitz couldn't understand Sylvanie unless she spoke in the enlightened language, and no matter how hard Sylvanie tried, he couldn't pick up the emotions or images she sent. Still, Granite was very pleased with their progress. "I have absolutely no doubt you two will be able to serve as cognates," he announced when the lesson finished. Fitz beamed at that, and Sophie smiled too, until she remembered that meant they'd have to get to work on sharing all their secret things. She told herself they'd find a way to get used to it, and she put on a brave face through dinner. Her mind was swimming, thinking of all the things she shouldn't share. She figured she was in for a long, restless night, but Calla's reverie bells chased away her worries. She was dreaming of mallow melt and custard bursts and cute boys flying on alicorns, when a voice dragged her back to consciousness. "Hey, Sophie, wake up. I think I found something."